Now, on the Georgia vote. Legal squabbles play out at the CDC and on the Fulton County Elections Board.
We sit down with Senate candidate Derek Dooley, one of three prominent Republicans fighting for the right to challenge incumbent Democrat Jon Ossoff next year.
And the Trump-endorsed candidate for Georgia governor says the 2026 election is about the future direction in Georgia. All right now on the Georgia vote.
From the 11 Alive studios, this is the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Hey, good morning. So there are no days off in the world of politics, not even on Labor Day weekend.
Definitely not on Labor Day weekend or any week in Georgia lately. And look, mixing football and politics, it is nothing new in Georgia. And this weekend, we saw plenty of it. Less than 24 hours ago, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp endorsed Derek Dooley in his run for U.S. Senate. The two attended a tailgate together in Athens before Georgia football's home game against Marshall. Kemp and Dooley, of course, they have both deep ties to the University of Georgia, and they have known each other for decades.
I thought this race was really suited for a political outsider, and I didn't know who that was going to be, but we know who that is now. And Derek has my full support, the First Ladies too, and we're ready to rock and roll. We want everybody to join us, and let's make this happen.
Derek Dooley, of course, is the son of legendary UGA football coach Vince Dooley. We sat down with the candidate this week to talk about his campaign and his record. A criticism that some of your opponents have raised is that they say you did not vote in 2016 and 2020. Is that true?
Well, I did vote in 2024 for Donald Trump.
But did you vote in 2016 and 2020?
There was a time, and those were part of that time in my career, where I was overly focused on my job and my family, and I didn't vote. I was moving state to state. It's not an excuse. It was what it was. I was overly focused. But I did vote in 2024 and 2022, and back to what I told you earlier, COVID and the Biden administration changed me. It really had an impact on me, and it told me, you know what, you need to get in the game here.
I'd imagine there may be some people who hear that, and then they hear you asking for them to cast a ballot for you, and might think, well, if you didn't vote in pivotal elections in 2016 and 2020, why should they come and cast a vote for you?
Well, the objective is let's get this seat back and beat Jon Ossoff. And so just like I voted for Donald Trump to get Biden out of there, all right, just like I voted for Governor Kemp to make sure Stacey Abrams didn't get in office, I'm asking the people to do what I did and vote for me to get Jon Ossoff out of the seat.
Are there any issues where you disagree with President Trump?
Well, let's start with what he campaigned on, okay? And so his core issues that he campaigned on, whether it was closing the border, all right, whether it was keeping our community safe and deporting a lot of these felons, whether it was keeping your taxes low, whether it was promoting peace by strengthening our military, all these things that he campaigned on, I absolutely support.
Is there any space between your positions and his positions? Anything you disagree on?
Well, I can't sit there and articulate every single issue that might be in his head and say, yeah, I'm all in. You know, there's a lot going on that of talk versus actual policy. And what I can tell you is what he's campaigned on and the results that he's delivered, I'm absolutely in support of it.
No disagreement? Not
on those issues.
Earlier this week, we saw a mass shooting in Minneapolis. Earlier this month, here in Georgia, there was the CDC shooting. There was a shooting at Fort Stewart. And, of course, last year, there was the shooting at Appalachia High School. If you're elected to the U.S. Senate, what will you do to stop these active shooters?
Let me just start with saying I got 3 kids, okay? And, like, when I saw, every time we see a news, something like that, I mean, your heart, it just sinks because I can't even imagine what the parents are going through, all right? And that's real. If you have kids, it's real. I think at some point, we got to put politics aside. And we got to address and acknowledge a mental health crisis, in my opinion, that's going on with our younger generation, okay? Let's just look at some of the data. Over the last 10 or 15 years, all right, we've seen anxiety and depression literally double in our young people, okay? We have seen suicides go up over 60%, all right? And it's like we have our head in the sand. We need to make this a priority. And again, it goes back to It's our greatest resource in our country. It's our young people. So why aren't we doing more things to address these issues so that they can have the kind of life that my generation had?
Some people argue that access to firearms and the ability to restrict access to firearms to some people, maybe via things like a red flag law that some states have adopted, is another component of the solution to these kinds of acts of violence. Would you support anything like that?
Well, the issue with the red flag laws is I'm an old lawyer. And so the first thing you learn as a lawyer is due process. I mean, everybody should have a right to due process before they're taking away a constitutional right.
Your elevator pitch to a potential voter is what?
If you said what motivates me the most on doing this, I was 12 years old when Ronald Reagan got elected, okay? He was really my first political inspiration because he inspired a belief in our country and its greatness, the ideals it stands for, and the opportunities it represents. And I just have a tremendous pride in this country. And I want my kids' generation and the next generation to have the same amount of pride. And that's why I'm doing this, because I want to pass off this country to our next generation in the same way that our parents passed it off to us.
Well, there is much more from our conversation. We have the entire interview streaming right now on 11 Alive Plus. If you have not already, you can download it for free to any device.
All right, time now for our Politics Roundtable. Today we have Republican strategist Joshua Edmonds, vice president of the Stone Ridge Group. He was the executive director for the Georgia Life Alliance from 2018 to 2022, where he authored the first draft of Georgia's heartbeat bill. Devin Barrington Ward, a progressive community organizer, political activist, and managing director of the Black Futurist Group. And Thomas Wheatley, Atlanta-based Axios reporter, who previously wrote for Atlanta Magazine and Creative Loafing. Devin, let's start with you. What is your takeaway from this? And just from seeing his interaction, I know that Zach and I spoke off camera. We've both met Mr. Dooley, and he seems like a guy that you could go and have lunch with.
Yeah. In some ways, he kind of reminds me of, I guess, a younger George Bush, the younger George Bush. And everybody would say, oh, you know, like George Bush is the guy that you want to go and have a beer with. And so in that regard, I guess he has something going for him. What I do think, though, is that the electorate is looking for different things right now, and they are looking for people who can answer questions directly. And there were some questions that were posed that I really think he did a good job of sidestepping around, but I think voters are starting to become a lot more savvy and can see when politicians are unwilling to answer certain questions, and it speaks to a potential integrity issue, but also just an issue around, is this a real person that is actually someone that I can relate to?
And I think it also speaks to the fact that he is not a politician. He's campaigning as not a politician. So if you act like a politician when those questions are come
that
out.
Whole veil. And so I would like to have seen a more direct answer to what he is going to do as a U.S. Senator around the scourge of gun violence in this country. I would have liked to see a more direct answer around where he is in opposition to some of President Trump's policies, because I do think that that gives you some level of crossover appeal. Right now, he has to...
And Devin, I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to make sure we bring in some other voices here, too. Talk about crossover appeal. There's always this tension between a primary electorate, right? Of course. And a general election electorate. And Faith, you bring up the concept of, can you have a beer with somebody? Can you have lunch with somebody? Mm-hmm. That's, in the eye of the beholder. A lot of politicians are good at connecting with people. That's what they do. Joshua, when you look at this Senate race right now on the Republican side, how do you stack the field here? Is Derek Dooley a rising star? Does he have an uphill battle to climb? What's the situation here?
I mean, it's still preseason football, but Derek Dooley is starting out first and long. There is a lot of work to do
there we go.
in this campaign for Derek Dooley to establish himself as a credible conservative option. And you got to, I think the underlying issue with what you're saying is, the sidestepping you have to wonder, well, why are you sidestepping? It's because there is not necessarily a record to establish, to lay out. He doesn't have a conservative pro-Trump voting record. He's not been vocal on these issues. He's not been around Georgia politics. And so you're not going to find these candidates differing with President Trump, but you're going to have a lot of distinguishing factors that show which candidates truly have stood with him. That's going to matter.
But how does he get people, like you said, he does not have a political record. He is a newcomer. Thomas, I'll bring it to you. How does he convince Republicans that he is the guy, though, right? He is different than what people are seeing, and he could possibly speak to disaffected Republicans who are not happy with what's happening right now.
Well, he'll definitely have the opportunity going against Collins, Congressman Collins, who has really aligned himself with Trump, MAGA loyalists. And frankly, I mean, what I find interesting is that's not really a place that Republicans want to be right now. You have a politically untested, a politically untested candidate in Derek Dooley, who right out of the gate is being asked about having to answer for his past voting record. And then on the other side, you see Mike Collins, Buddy Carter. This is setting the Republicans up for a really nasty reconciliation period come next.
Through the primary you're talking about.
Yeah.
We're going to go to break in one moment.
Yep.
One topic. Thomas, 5 seconds. Governor Brian Kemp is putting his weight behind Derek Dooley. How big of a factor is that?
It's huge.
You say
huge.
Republicans don't want to be here, but Governor Kemp does.
He does,
He's
yeah.
very
Most
well-liked.
well-funded and most popular statewide elected official.
Yeah.
On that note, a lot to talk about. Georgia Vote and our panel will be right back after this.
I'm just a common sense business guy, that's got business background, legislative background. I got a desire to serve the people of Georgia, and if you want lower taxes, better education, and public safety, and access to good health care, then I might be your guy.
Well, that was Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones officially kicking off his campaign for Georgia governor Tuesday night. His top opponent in a Republican primary, Chris Carr, ran into a legal roadblock this week.
A federal judge dismissed Chris Carr's lawsuit against the Burt Jones campaign, saying Carr does not have legal standing to block Burt Jones's access to a special fundraising vehicle known as a leadership committee. Those committees allow politicians to raise unlimited funds, but it's only available to some positions. Burt Jones, as lieutenant governor, has access to it, but Chris Carr, as attorney general, does not. Carr's spokesperson says their campaign will be reviewing its legal options.
Well, one of the Democratic Party candidates for governor, former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, continued her Standing Up for Georgia tour this week in Warner Robins. On Wednesday, she met with local community leaders and hosted a veterans roundtable at One American Legion post. Bottoms and all candidates running for governor know that the CDC is one of the top employers in Metro Atlanta, and this week there's a change at the top. On Thursday, the White House named Jim O'Neill the acting director of the CDC, and he's taking over for Susan Menarez, who was fired by President Trump. As a result of the shakeup, there was a string of high-profile resignations and a rally outside the CDC to show support for those who stepped down. O'Neill currently serves as the Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's insisted he is pro-vaccine, but he's also criticized what he called federal overreach during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's been about 2 months since Georgia nurse and mother Adriana Smith was taken off of life support after doctors were able to deliver her baby boy. Well, now her family is opening up about her life actually without her, and the fight to keep her story alive.
Adriana Smith, a Georgia nurse and mother, was taken off of life support back in June after giving birth to her son named Chance. Born at just over 2 pounds, Chance is now close to 5 pounds and fighting every day to get stronger. Adriana's mother is also fighting for something else. She is speaking out against Georgia's heartbeat law. April Newkirk, Adriana Smith's mother, says she's working with lawmakers to try to change that law. She told 11 Alive's Jennifer Bellamy she does not want another family to go through something like this.
We don't want no other mother to hurt the way I hurt. No father, no brothers, no aunts, no uncles, no children to be without their parents. A change needs to come.
Now, we have followed Adriana's case for you from the beginning, and you can find our previous coverage, including political reactions from both sides of the aisle, on our website, 11alive.com.
And this is a very sensitive topic for so many people out there. We do want to bring back our panel and remind you all we are not giving legal opinions here, but political analysis as to the politics around it. Joshua, I'm going to bring you in here because as someone who is very close to the heartbeat bill, we're seeing people who are pushing back against it, but we also see people who are for it politically. How does this play out with Adriana Smith's case going into the midterm?
Well, if you look at cases like this, which are so tragic, and we've talked about it before, the debate as to whether or not the heartbeat bill actually has any role in this terrible case at all. The reality, though, is that we have a situation where chance is a miracle. We were talking about this case in terms of whether or not he would ever survive, and here he is looking forward at the possibility of going home, looking at a long life ahead of him, hopefully, with an incredible medical miracle as a story. And somehow looking back at this and saying, as a result of this miracle, we should undo the heartbeat bill, which the implication is would have ended his life. I hope Chance never sees these stories, because this is undermining something that's truly incredible about our medical professionals and his life, that he has overcome incredible adversity and he's alive today.
And we've heard some people express your thoughts and side on it, but we've also heard some people like her mother who said, I wish we didn't have to go through this, Devin.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we are talking about Chance, but we're not talking about his mother. And his mother is not here, and his big brother doesn't have a mom either. And where were they considered when all of this was going on? And I think we can get into the technicalities of the heartbeat bill, but we can also talk about the public perception that Republicans have a problem with, which is that the vast majority of people want to be able to make these decisions between their doctors and their family and not have the government set out policies that are really infringing on people's ability to do family planning the way that they feel is best for their family. And that's a decision that should have been made between their doctors, between Adriana's mother and her family members, because they also had to weigh what was important for the child that is also here now as well, that does not have a mom. And how do we hold that complexity as well beyond the political talking points and what may be permissible under law or not?
And I think you both do a really good job of sketching out the themes of this conversation that we're going to continue to hear, because this is an important, controversial topic. We saw it through the 2024 presidential election, the issue of abortion access and reproductive health care. We know it's going to continue to be an issue moving into 2026. Thomas, I want to bring you in and shift gears slightly. We know that one of the big races in 2026 is the gubernatorial contest. The Republican primary with Burt Jones and Chris Carr got a lot of attention this week, particularly in some legal battles this week. What do you make of how that is all playing out for Chris Carr and Burt Jones?
Chris Carr is at a incredible disadvantage right now.
Why?
Because he does not have access to a basically unlimited campaign fundraising account like the way that Burt Jones does. Burt Jones also has one more legislative session as lieutenant governor, which gives him an incredible bully pulpit, which he's already using during the offseason at study committees talking about eliminating the income tax here in Georgia. So Burt Jones has all of these avenues to campaign while also legislating and serving as lieutenant governor. Chris Carr really, without this political leadership committee, he has cases that he can bring to attention to voters, but he doesn't have the options.
What are the Democrats doing right now in this gubernatorial race? There are a lot of them running.
Well, it seems like, Keisha Lance Bottoms and others are doing what they are supposed to be doing, which is crossing the state and going to areas that are not as familiar with their particular political positions that they held previously.
Getting out of the metro.
And getting out of the metro area, because while Metro Atlanta is important for any gubernatorial race, the rest of the state is also important as well.
That's right.
And folks have to recognize that you don't automatically inherit the machine or the infrastructure that Stacey Abrams put in place, that you're going to have to do that work yourself.
And doing that work, Devin, I hate to cut you off. We're getting the wrap here. There's always so much to talk about in Georgia politics, guys.
He's the bad guy, not me.
Thank you so much. I don't know about that. Thank you all for watching. We'll be right back with more Georgia Vote right after this. Well, welcome back. The controversy involving Fulton County's election board, it is simmering. It is unlikely to cool down anytime soon.
That's right. So for now, the county does not have to pay a daily fine that was initially levied for failure to appoint 2 Republican members. Earlier in the week, Democratic Fulton County commissioners, they were found in civil contempt until they agreed to appoint 2 Republican nominees to the elections board who they claim are election deniers. Well, Thursday evening, the judge who levied this fine says that he will pause the enforcement of it while the case goes through the appeals process. Well, up next, our voice of the voter is helping to fund AI projects throughout Atlanta. Why he says Atlanta is quickly becoming an AI hotspot. Well, this morning, our voice of the voter takes us to Midtown Atlanta, where we meet with Avalon Bingham, a general manager and investor at Drive Capital Atlanta, a venture capital firm funding AI startups. Well, he says that the talent is here, but he hopes our elected officials can do their part to put Atlanta on the AI map.
So much is happening here in Atlanta, and a lot of what's happening in technology is based here in Midtown. So it's been a fantastic experience working here, particularly in a place like the Biltmore, where entrepreneurs feel welcome, are encouraged to come and build. You know, Drive Capital, our presence is in multiple markets across North America, but we opened our Atlanta office when I joined in the fall of 2022. Typically, this space is kind of reserved for our founders who are building what we hope are the next generation of market-defining companies in Atlanta.
It's interesting because part of the requirement of the funding for your VC is for the teams to actually work here.
You have companies that are in here, they are talking to customers, they're in here, they're coding. If you're an early stage founder or an entrepreneur, your resources are limited, right? You have very kind of finite access to resources in those early days. So to have a place where you can come in, you can get work done, you can be connected, potentially closer to customers, close to talent that you think about hiring.
Avalon, when it comes to policy and the influence our elected officials have on the growth or potentially even stunting the growth of AI companies, how do you feel about it right now?
I think in the state, we have not necessarily seen any policies that are hampering those efforts to build, big companies. I think the biggest opportunity is making sure that consumers are protected when you think about things like privacy, security. One of the things that I see is a lot of our talent from Atlanta leave to go to bigger markets, states like California, as opposed to, a state like Georgia. So I would hope that the way that, our elected officials, and whether that's at a city level, a state level, or even at a federal level, want to make sure that we have a level playing field for, one, how we are able to build in a state like Georgia.
What would you say is your biggest concern right now?
I think the biggest concern for growth for AI, I think, comes back to we need more capital. We need more resources to help support that early founder, that early builder who wants to build in Atlanta. The reality is, yes, we have programs, all across Atlanta. These are in the forms of accelerators, but we need a standalone flagship program. So for me, it's the funding, which will help keep more talent in town, and being able to build programming to support that next generation of builders.
What are you most optimistic about?
People want to be in Atlanta. They want to grow here. They want to build here. So that's what gives me optimism and gets me excited every day to do this work.
And what a great story, Faith.
Yes, thanks to Avalon for that. We hope to see you back here next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.